For more than 50 years, the world looked at Bruce Springsteen and saw something almost indestructible. The denim, the gravel in his voice, the marathon concerts that stretched late into the night, the fists in the air, the sweat, the fire. To millions of people, Bruce Springsteen wasn't just a musician. He became a symbol of endurance itself, the working-class poet who could somehow turn exhaustion into hope. But behind that image, behind the roaring stadiums and the mythology of the boss, there was another story unfolding quietly for decades. A private struggle very few people truly understood. And now, at 76 years old, that hidden emotional battle feels impossible to ignore. Because time changes even the strongest men. And sometimes, the people who spend their entire lives giving strength to others are the very ones silently fighting to hold themselves together. The strange thing about Bruce Springsteen is that he never looked like someone who was supposed to break. He came from the kind of America that taught boys to swallow pain before they even understood what pain was. Freehold, New Jersey, factories, Catholic guilt, economic struggle, fathers who rarely explained themselves emotionally, men who carried frustration like armor. Long before the fame arrived, Bruce was already learning how to survive emotionally by staying in motion. And maybe that's why he spent his entire life running toward the stage. Because standing still meant feeling everything. In the early years, people saw ambition. But underneath it was something more complicated. Restlessness. A hunger so intense it almost looked painful. Even as a young musician, Bruce performed like someone trying to outrun a ghost no one else could see. Every concert became physical, explosive, draining. He didn't simply sing songs. He attacked them, as though every lyric carried emotional stakes bigger than entertainment itself. Night after night, he gave audiences something deeply personal without fully explaining where it came from. And maybe he couldn't, because some emotional wounds don't arrive all at once. They form slowly, quietly, over years. Especially inside men taught never to speak about vulnerability. By the time albums like Born to Run and Born in the USA transformed him into a global icon, the public image had already hardened into legend. Bruce Springsteen became the boss. Not just a nickname, a role. And roles can become prisons. Because once the world decides who you are, it becomes dangerous to show them anything else. Fans didn't just want music from Bruce Springsteen. They wanted certainty, strength, energy, meaning. They wanted the man on stage to carry their disappointments for them. And somehow, he did. For decades. But there was always something haunting beneath his performances. If you listen closely to his music, especially the quieter moments, you can hear it. The loneliness, the fear of becoming emotionally numb, the desperate search for connection, the complicated relationship between fathers and sons. Men trying to escape themselves. Men trying to become someone better before time runs out. These weren't just stories Bruce observed. They were emotional fingerprints. Fragments of himself hidden in plain sight. What made Springsteen unusual wasn't simply that he wrote about working-class struggle. It was the emotional weight underneath the masculinity. His songs often sounded powerful on the surface. But underneath, they carried exhaustion. A man trying to keep moving because stopping felt dangerous. And the higher he climbed, the heavier that emotional contradiction became. Because fame does something strange to identity. First, success feels validating. Then eventually, it becomes expectation. By the 1980s, Bruce Springsteen wasn't merely famous. He was culturally symbolic. America projected itself onto him. Politicians quoted him. Stadiums worshipped him. Entire generations attached their personal memories to his voice. But fame has a hidden psychological cost few people talk about. The public slowly stops separating the performer from the person. And over time, even the performer can forget where one ends and the other begins. Bruce spent years becoming larger than life in front of millions, while privately carrying emotional questions that fame could never answer. Who are you when the music stops? Who are you when the audience goes home? Who are you when strength becomes the only version of yourself people are willing to accept? Those questions followed him quietly through the years. And perhaps the most revealing part of Bruce Springsteen's story is this. Even at the height of his fame, there were moments when he seemed deeply uncomfortable with celebrity itself. Unlike many stars, Bruce rarely carried himself like someone intoxicated by fame. If anything, he often appeared burdened by it. There was always tension in him, a push and pull between connection and isolation. He could command an arena of 70,000 people, then sound almost painfully introspective in interviews afterward, as if public adoration never fully silenced the private uncertainty underneath. And maybe that's because Bruce Springsteen understood something terrifying about fame earlier than most people do. The crowd can love the image, while never truly knowing the person. That realization changes people, especially artists whose work comes from emotional truth. Over the years, Bruce became known for his incredible stamina on stage. 3-hour concerts, endless energy, relentless passion. People admired it, but very few stopped to ask what kind of emotional pressure it takes to maintain that intensity year after year, decade after decade, while aging in front of the entire world. Because eventually, performance stops being just performance. It becomes responsibility, and responsibility can slowly consume identity. The public saw a man who looked invincible. But invincibility is often just exhaustion wearing confidence as a disguise. As Bruce entered middle age, subtle cracks in the mythology became harder to ignore. Not scandals, not collapse, something quieter. Moments of emotional honesty that felt almost startling coming from someone long viewed as a symbol of masculine resilience. He began speaking more openly about his childhood, about depression, about emotional darkness that had existed beneath the surface for years. And suddenly, the image of the boss became more human than many fans were prepared for. Because behind all the power, there had always been pain. Not dramatic pain, not sensational pain. The kind that sits silently inside a person for years while they continue functioning, performing, smiling, working, giving people pieces of themselves night after night. The kind of pain that becomes invisible precisely because the person carrying it appears strong. And perhaps that is the deepest irony of Bruce Springsteen's life. The man who helped millions of people feel less alone may have spent years privately wrestling with loneliness himself. Not physical loneliness, something more internal. The loneliness of carrying expectations too heavy to put down. The loneliness of being seen as a symbol before being seen as a human being. And as the years passed, that emotional burden only grew heavier, because eventually, even legends grow tired. Even icons begin confronting time. Even the boss has to face the person behind the myth. And that's where Bruce Springsteen's story becomes far more complicated than most people realize. Because the private struggle that followed him for decades was no longer staying hidden. For most of his life, Bruce Springsteen survived by moving forward. Tour after tour, album after album, city after city. The stage became more than a profession. It became a kind of emotional shelter. Because when Bruce Springsteen performed, everything made sense for a few hours. The noise inside him had somewhere to go. But eventually, even movement stops working as an escape. And that may be the hidden truth behind Bruce Springsteen's private struggle. The realization that success, admiration, and legendary status could not protect him from himself. For years, fans interpreted his intensity as pure confidence. But intensity and inner peace are not the same thing. Sometimes intensity is what people create when they are trying desperately not to collapse inward. And as Bruce got older, the emotional cost of carrying the boss identity began surfacing more openly. Not through scandal, not through self-destruction, through honesty. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it reveals how fragile even the strongest public figures can become. When Bruce later spoke publicly about depression, many fans were stunned. Not because depression itself was shocking, but because it challenged the image they had built around him for decades. This was Bruce Springsteen, the giant, the fighter, the man who could electrify entire stadiums for 4 straight hours. How could someone like that be quietly struggling emotionally? But that question reveals a deeper misunderstanding people often have about mental health. The people who appear strongest are sometimes the most practiced at hiding pain. Bruce described periods where darkness seemed to arrive without warning. Moments where emotional heaviness followed him despite career success, family, and public admiration. And perhaps the most haunting part was this: he understood exactly where some of it came from. For years, Bruce spoke carefully about his complicated relationship with his father. Not with bitterness, not with cruelty, but with the emotional honesty of someone trying to understand inherited pain. His father, Douglas Springsteen, was often described as emotionally distant, unpredictable, burdened by his own inner struggles. Bruce grew up watching a man who seemed trapped inside himself, frustrated, silent, hard to reach emotionally. That leaves marks on a child, especially on sons, because boys often grow up studying their fathers silently, trying to learn what being a man is supposed to look like. And when emotional openness is absent, many children internalize the same silence. Bruce would later reveal that one of his greatest fears was becoming emotionally trapped in the same darkness he witnessed growing up. And in many ways, fame complicated that fear instead of curing it. Because success can distract people from unresolved emotional wounds, without actually healing them. The world saw Bruce Springsteen becoming larger than life. Meanwhile, privately, he was wrestling with questions far more personal than celebrity. Can you escape the emotional inheritance of your parents? Can achievement repair old emotional fractures? Can applause fill loneliness? For a while, maybe the stage helped. But eventually, exhaustion catches up to everyone, especially artists who spend decades turning emotion into performance. There's a reason Bruce's concerts became legendary. They weren't just musical events. They felt almost spiritual. By the end of a performance, he looked completely drained, soaked in sweat, physically depleted, emotionally exposed. Audiences saw passion, but beneath it was something else too. A man giving away enormous parts of himself night after night. And the human mind is not built to live permanently at emotional extremes. Over time, even the adrenaline of performing can become complicated. Because once the lights disappear, silence returns. And silence has a way of amplifying thoughts people spend years trying to outrun. As Bruce entered later adulthood, another reality quietly emerged. Aging. Not simply physically, psychologically. There is something uniquely difficult about aging in public when the world still expects you to embody the same energy that made you famous decades earlier. Fans often freeze celebrities in time emotionally, but the person inside keeps changing. At 30, Bruce Springsteen represented youthful rebellion and restless ambition. At 50, he became a symbol of endurance. At 76, he faces something far more vulnerable: mortality. And mortality changes how people see everything. Friends disappear. Peers die. The body slows down. The future shrinks in ways it never did before. Suddenly, legacy stops feeling abstract. It becomes personal. You can hear traces of that awareness in Bruce's later interviews and performances. There's more reflection now. More emotional openness. Less need to appear invulnerable. Almost as if age slowly gave him permission to stop pretending he had all the answers. But that emotional honesty came with pain too. Because opening old emotional doors means confronting memories that once stayed buried beneath work and performance. Bruce has spoken about periods where depression became frighteningly intense. Moments where even people close to him worried about how deeply the darkness had reached. And what makes his story so emotionally powerful is that he never framed these struggles as weakness. If anything, he treated them as part of being human. That matters. Especially for men raised in generations where emotional suffering was often hidden behind anger, work, alcohol, or silence. Bruce Springsteen came from a world where vulnerability was dangerous, where masculinity often meant emotional suppression, where men endured pain privately until it consumed them. And perhaps one of the bravest things he ever did was publicly admit that strength alone could not save him. Not fame, not money, not legendary status. Just because millions admire you doesn't mean you stop being emotionally fragile. That truth changed how many people saw him. But it also deepened the emotional meaning of his music. Songs that once sounded like anthems suddenly revealed another layer underneath them. Exhaustion, longing, fear, loneliness, emotional survival. People realized Bruce Springsteen had been quietly telling the truth about himself all along. They just weren't listening closely enough. And then came another painful reality. The body itself began forcing limits. Years of marathon performances eventually collided with age and health concerns. Tour postponements, physical strain, public reminders that even icons are mortal. For fans, it felt unsettling. Bruce Springsteen had always represented stamina, movement, power. Seeing vulnerability appear physically made the mythology feel suddenly human. And maybe that frightened people. Because when legends age publicly, audiences are forced to confront their own relationship with time too. We grow older alongside them. The music becomes attached to entire chapters of our lives. So when Bruce slows down, part of the audience feels their own mortality reflected back at them. That emotional connection is deeper than fandom. It's shared aging, shared memory, shared fear of time moving too fast. But perhaps the saddest part of Bruce Springsteen's private struggle is this. For decades, he carried enormous emotional responsibility for other people's hope while quietly trying to protect his own. That burden is difficult to explain unless you've lived inside public expectation. Millions projected meaning onto him, strength onto him, resilience onto him. And he spent much of his life trying not to disappoint that image. Even while privately fighting battles no audience could fully see. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when the person everyone depends on emotionally becomes exhausted themselves? For Bruce Springsteen, that question followed him for years. Sometimes silently, sometimes painfully. But instead of hiding completely behind mythology, he slowly chose honesty. And that honesty may ultimately become more powerful than the legend itself. Because beneath all the stadium lights, beneath the fame, beneath the boss, was always a man trying to understand how to live with his own mind. And now, at 76 years old, Bruce Springsteen appears to be confronting the final and most personal chapter of all. Not how to become a legend, but how to remain human after surviving one. At 76 years old, Bruce Springsteen no longer moves through the world like a man trying to prove himself. That urgency is gone now. What remains is something quieter, more reflective, more human. And perhaps that is the most surprising chapter of Bruce Springsteen's life. Because after decades of performing strength for millions of people, he seems less interested in protecting the mythology of the boss, and more interested in telling the truth about the man underneath it. Age changes artists. Not only physically, emotionally. There comes a point where applause stops answering the deeper questions. A point where legacy becomes less about fame and more about meaning. Bruce appears to have reached that place. In recent years, there's been a noticeable softness in him. Not weakness, softness. The kind that sometimes arrives after a lifetime of fighting yourself internally. His voice carries more reflection now, more acceptance, more awareness of time. And time has become impossible to ignore. Friends are gone. Musicians he once stood beside have disappeared into memory. Entire eras of his life now feel preserved inside old songs and faded photographs. That realization changes a person, especially someone whose entire career was built on movement, energy, and escape. Because eventually even the road ends. And maybe that's what makes Bruce Springsteen's later years so emotionally powerful to witness. He no longer looks like a man running from darkness. He looks like someone learning how to live beside it. There's wisdom in that, but also sadness. For much of his life, Bruce carried the emotional expectations of millions. People saw him as a symbol of resilience, the voice of workers, dreamers, broken families, restless souls. But symbols are dangerous things to become. Because symbols are rarely allowed to age honestly. The public wants legends frozen in time. Forever powerful, forever loud, forever certain. Real human beings cannot survive that forever. And Bruce Springsteen knows it. That may be why his honesty about depression, emotional struggle, and vulnerability feels so important now. He shattered the illusion that toughness alone defines masculinity. He showed that even men who appear powerful can feel lost internally. Even icons can become emotionally exhausted. Even legends need help sometimes. That truth may become one of his greatest legacies. Not just the music, the honesty. Because Bruce never fully hid from the darker parts of himself. He eventually turned toward them, spoke about them, and allowed people to see the complexity behind the image. And in doing so, he gave something rare to his audience. Permission. Permission for other people, especially men, to admit they are struggling too. That kind of impact goes far beyond celebrity. It becomes human. Today, when Bruce walks on stage, the energy is still there. But it feels different now. Less like defiance. More like gratitude. As though he understands every performance could be one more memory added to the lives of people who grew older with him. And perhaps that is the emotional heart of Bruce Springsteen's story. Not fame. Not records. Not sold-out stadiums. Survival. Emotional survival. The survival of a man who spent decades carrying invisible weight while trying to give hope to others through music. A man who discovered that strength is not the absence of pain, but the willingness to keep living honestly despite it. For years, audiences saw Bruce Springsteen as larger than life. But maybe the reason people connected to him so deeply was because, underneath everything, he was painfully real. The fears, the loneliness, the searching, the exhaustion, the longing to feel understood. Those emotions never disappeared behind the fame. If anything, fame magnified them. And now, at 76, Bruce Springsteen stands not as an untouchable icon, but as something far more meaningful. A human being who spent a lifetime trying to turn private struggle into something beautiful enough for the rest of the world to survive alongside him.